Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in this week. As always, great episode, great guest. Before I introduce him, though, I'd like to go over a few things as I do every single week. First, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It helps boost the podcast, grow the audience, and ultimately helps me create the best show for you guys by having the best guests on. Additionally, please go follow me on social media, ROYBTZ on Instagram and ROY_BNTZ on Twitter. And if you go to my Twitter profile, at the top, you'll be able to access the newsletter. Subscribe there, and then you can get all the blog posts, updates about the podcast, about the guests, about the future of the show, and most importantly, just an easy way for you to get the podcast into your inbox every single week. Also, please consider supporting this podcast. As you know, this podcast is currently independent. I do not work with any sponsors by choice. So if this is something you feel like you get value from, if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, consider supporting it. I would greatly appreciate that, as it is run by you guys, the listeners. Finally, if you want to start your own podcast, I have a full tutorial that covers everything you need to know, soup to nuts, A to Z, about how to start, grow, execute, market, reach out to guests, why you should even start a podcast in this day and age, why it's the best distributor of content, etc., etc. So if it's something you're interested in, go check that out, as always, in the show notes. All right, on to the guest. This week, I have Neel Parekh. Neel is a super interesting guy. I think if I was younger, I would do exactly what he's doing, which is essentially a digital nomad, but he was doing that way before the current trend of digital nomad started. Well, I guess the trend started a long time ago, but I feel like it went more mainstream around COVID, where everyone, I guess, finally understood, hey, I could really work from anywhere. I don't need to be tied down to a physical location. So he's been doing that for, quite the while. And what afforded him this type of lifestyle is the business that he started, which is an online business. It's called MaidThis, M-A-I-D, this. And essentially it's a cleaning service, mostly for Airbnbs, but also just for residential. And he started it. It's completely online. All the workers are remote. And we talked a lot about that, the quote, air quotes, non-sexy business, the small business, the ones that maybe don't get as many headlines as the big unicorns that raise all the money, but they're great businesses. They can afford you an amazing lifestyle. And we get into all those different things. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. So why wait? Let's jump right into it. Let me introduce this week's guest. Without further ado, here is Neel Parekh. Enjoy the episode, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Neel, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Roy. Excited to be here.
Yeah, man, it should be fun. So we talked a little bit, before we started recording, but where are you located right now, if you could tell the listeners?
Yeah, I'm currently posted up in South Africa. So I'm in Cape Town. I've been here in South Africa a couple weeks, but I been bouncing around Africa for the last couple months. But yeah, I headed out of here on Thursday, which I'm very sad about, and going to a much more expensive country of Norway, but currently posted in Cape Town.
That's quite the extreme, dude. South Africa to Norway. It's like the southernmost and pretty much the northernmost. You're just trying to get all the all the angles.
Seriously, and when I get to Norway, we're taking another flight literally to get to the very top of Norway. So it's
Really?
Completely on the opposite side, yeah.
But for you now, it's winter, right? In South Africa? Other side of...
Yeah, South Africa's winter time right now. So definitely a little bit colder for sure.
But then I guess northern Norway would be cold as well. So you're kind of going from cold to cold.
Yeah, this is the opposite of what I've been doing the last few years, because normally I just chase the summertime, and here I am going from winter to winter. But I guess just got to change out the nomad thing, right?
Yeah. Is there something specific you're gonna go see in like northern part of Norway?
It's
fjords or...
Yeah, they're going to do fjords for a couple of days, but then in the north, we're going to a place called Lofoten. Honestly, because I read about
Lofoten.
this co-living place. I used to do co-living a lot, which is just kind of a community of people who live together essentially. And they have a co-working space there, and you live there, and you kind of have a baked-in community. So I just read really good things about it, and it's supposed to be beautiful. So I thought, hey, let me go check it out. And it happens to be up in Lofoten. So that's the main reason. And then the area is supposed to be incredibly gorgeous as well. And I've never been, so that'll be a good chance to knock it all out.
Yeah, Norway's my one of the top three places that I haven't been that I really want to go. It's the amount of
what's the other two?
Probably Iceland and what was the other one? Iceland and I mean, I guess Japan was, and then I crossed that off a couple of years ago. But Iceland and Norway are top two, and then I'm blanking on the third right now.
Yeah, Japan's up there for me as well. So I think we're the same.
Japan is like going into an alternate universe, dude. It's so different. Like if you go, if you travel from the US to Europe, it's different, but it's like you comprehend for the most part what's happening. Like you can kind of read majority of the signs because it's in English, like at least it's English letters, and you can kind of communicate and you can kind of understand. You go to Japan, it's so different. It's just so wildly different. And I've been to Asia, I've been to Thailand, I've been to a lot of countries. Japan is just so unique and different and fun. I loved it.
Man, I'm stoked. Yeah, like I've always described it as, at least my thought process about it would be, it's the first world country that's completely not Western, right? Like typically places I'll go, and it might be very different from the US, but that's because part of it is just a developing country, right? Naturally, it's going to be very different, and the way of living is very different. And if you go to Europe, it's very Western. So it's one of the few spots which is extremely different from Western nations, but it's also extremely developed. So I'm stoked to go see it.
No, you should. And the food is top notch. The food is just so good. Yeah, all the food I had there. Not even the sushi. Like I went to Indian restaurants, some of the best Indian I've ever had. I went to I think a Mediterranean, like a ramen, anything across the board. It was 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe tell people, because and I want to touch a lot about the digital nomad aspect. I'm interested because you've been doing this for a minute. This isn't like you just started when this was a hot thing in COVID, where everyone was like, I want to expand. I'm sick of the office. This is an opportunity for me to do this. And you've been doing that way before. So I want to maybe you tell people what affords you this type of lifestyle. Like, what are you doing? And then we can kind of go into some other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, man, you're making me sound like an old OG in the nomad space, but I'll take it.
You kind of are a little bit.
I guess, yeah, relative. I like it. So I started traveling in 2015. So my background is I worked in finance. I worked in tech private equity for a few years, started a cleaning company on the side called MaidThis. And back then I was just doing it as a side hustle. I wanted to eventually quit and travel and also kind of help out my parents financially. So started a local cleaning company, figured out how to run it completely remotely. Mm-hmm. So 2 years after that, after I started in 2015, quit my job, booked a one-way flight to South America and started traveling and growing the business that way. So it is a local company based in Los Angeles and San Francisco now, specializing in mostly Airbnb cleanings, but also regular residential. Since then, we've transformed it into a franchise offering. So pretty much if someone else wants to copy the same blueprint I did about having a local business but manage it remotely, they could just copy what we did and have MaidThis in their city and MaidThis franchise. So now it's a franchise operation, but that's what's afforded me the ability to travel. And honestly, at the beginning, I was like, okay, if this pays for some of my travel, like a couple grand here, spits it off, I'm happy. Like it's fine. I'm staying in hostels and stuff like that. So I wasn't really thinking big things about it. Then just kind of started to grow and grow and grow, especially with the growth of the short-term rental space. And I realized like, oh, wow, this has like a lot of potential. So really doubled down on it and scaled it. So now we have 2 corporate locations, launched a franchise arm a couple of years ago. So we have about 4 franchise locations now and aiming to add a couple more this year.
How hard is the franchise business, or how easy? I don't know. You tell me.
Dude, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
What makes it harder than just, I don't know, a regular startup, right? I have an idea, I raise money, I gather a team, I build it out, and then exit hopefully in 10 years, like fairy tale story. How is this different? What's the story here? What's the trajectory?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't say it's like harder than other things. And if you think about it, everyone has a limited amount of time in the day. Whether you work for a tech company or for MaidThis franchise, you're still working 8 to 10 hours a day. So hard is hard. It's relative. But I would say in comparison to a local business, because what I came from was I knew the tech world, but then I started a local business, which crushed it. And the reason it crushed it is because you're competing against guys who don't know what they're doing with marketing. Like it's not that hard to make some money in local businesses. You just have to be decent at marketing. And decent means do the stuff which was relevant like 3 years ago, which is current in the local business realm, right?
Yeah.
So I was coming from that background and doing very well in this. So I'd say it's hard because for franchising, number one, there's a lot of regulations around it, right? It took me almost a year of getting it properly set up. Number two, this is something I wasn't familiar with. I'm going from selling a cleaning to now selling a pretty expensive product, right? It's $35,000 for the buy-in, all in cost 50 to 70,000. So I feel like the stakes are higher. If I award someone a franchise, I want them to be hyper successful because they're giving a lot of money to do this, right? And there's a lot of training and things involved in it. And partially is, at least for me, was, with any startup, and when you get going, you have to wonder, okay, what's my target customer? I haven't had to do that in a while, kind of reinventing the wheel of saying, okay, the people I'm looking for, first of all, what do they look like? Yeah. Once I figure that part out, where are they hanging out? How do I get in front of them? It's a lot of trial and error with what we're doing here. So I feel like now I've kind of gotten my legs under me and understand where it's going. So I think your statement's a little bit more accurate than what I said about difficulties. I think it's difficult because it was a brand new business and I had no idea what I was getting into, as opposed to just the business model being very difficult to begin with.
I mean, I'm interested. How did the idea of MaidThis, how did you even come across it? It was just a eureka moment. Did you read something online? And I'll preface this. I'm interested because I feel like there's this narrative out there, and you can completely correct me if I'm wrong. There's a narrative out there that's like almost taboo to break, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur. It's just like, and I hear this all the time. It's almost nauseating. It's like, you have to find your passion. You have to be passionate. It's all passion, changing the world, passion, changing the world, passion, changing the world. It's repeat, recycle, rinse, recycle. And that's great. I'm not knocking it. It's amazing. It just feels a little inauthentic at times. And it's like all these startups are, it's like they're not trying to make money, right? Like all about changing the world and passion. And that's great. If that's your type of endeavor, that's something you really want to do. And some of them are doing it. It's not that they're not. But a lot are just, I feel like they're just copying the lines and blurting them out. And I'm interested, like, for you, because I've heard some of the podcasts that you've been on, sometimes it's fine just to run a profitable business. It doesn't have to be your biggest passion. And that affords you, right, the life you want to live. Like, you can have a profitable business and live a passionate life that's not maybe related around business. Like, that's okay. And again, if I'm wrong completely, you're fine to correct me.
Yeah, I don't know if this is recorded with a video call, but I'm just nodding my head like absolutely, man. Have you ever seen the show Silicon Valley?
I have.
All right, there's this one episode where the guys go up on the stage for like this tech crunch thing to pitch their startup, and every single one of them goes, "We are changing the world through online forums, and we are changing the world through software for trash providers." And it's like, it's comical, and it's the whole thing is it's satire, because every Silicon Valley company is changing the world through whatever. And I kind of laugh at like I've heard great things about the company Typeform. I use them as well, right? Sure. But apparently they've cultivated such a good culture where everyone's like, "Hey, we're changing the world." And sometimes I kind of laugh. I'm like, "Hey, look, it's like it's a forum, it's an online forum, like it's I don't know, like and maybe I'm not thinking about it correctly. So I don't know. Hey, maybe you need to think that way to actually do big things. I don't really know. But the way I think about it is kind of what you said. Number one, I think a lot of boring businesses make money. I think it's fact. If you look at a lot of the staples in the economy in the world, these are boring, old school industries which print cash. That's number one. Based off of that fact, I would rather start that. And then, like you said, go do whatever I want in life. Right, figure out a way to systemize that. And personally, I like the process of just business. Doesn't matter if it's cleaning, doesn't matter if it's painting or something else, just kind of the iteration and the process of, hey, here's a problem. How do I solve it? How do I build a team, get culture, build systems? That's fun to me, as opposed to what the end product is. I do remember at the beginning, I thought, we had to be a big mission-driven company. Like, hey, we're changing the world by helping people with cleaning. And that helps them save time. Now, I think the reality is, I even tell my team, hey, we're doing this business so everyone here could have the type of freedom you want. If you want to use MaidThis as a launching pad to be able to travel the world because it's remote, that's awesome. Provide for family, that's awesome. Give to charity, that's fine. Whatever you want it to be is up to you. And that's what I tell the franchisees as well. Most of them are not buying into MaidThis because they're like, hey, I'm so passionate about cleaning. I'd be a little bit worried if someone did come to me and say that. I'd probably say this might not be the right fit for what we're doing over here anyways. it's I don't want to call it a means to an end because that sounds not correct, but
Yeah.
I agree with you. Like, I don't think business needs to be the purpose of your life. Almost negates all the other aspects of your life. If your whole passion is baked into your job, it's a little bit weird. So no, I'm fully on board with it. Makes money, it provides a lifestyle you want, it helps you achieve your goals. That's awesome. That's the whole purpose of what MaidThis is here for, and what, in my opinion, business should be for.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of, I can see both sides of it. I can see the side where if you want to build something great and you want to cultivate a culture and you want to create a cult-like following inside of a company, you have to sell that, right? We're changing the world, even though, I don't know, maybe you do believe it, maybe you don't, but you have to sell it anyway. And you have to sell it to investors, and you have to sell it to the workers, and you have to sell it to the users. You have to sell it to the media. You have to sell it to everyone. We are changing the world. That's how you cultivate, a billion-dollar company. That's how you do it. On the flip side, if you don't want to do that, and again, I'm not knocking it. That's great. It just feels inauthentic when a lot of companies, you follow UFC a little bit.
Yeah.
So when, Conor McGregor came along and he had his shtick, right? But it was his shtick. And it felt authentic, and people gravitated towards him, and he was awesome, right? Like, I don't think he's that awesome anymore, but at the time, I think he was magnetic and amazing and charismatic, and he had this X factor. And then all these other fighters tried to do exactly what he was doing, and it just didn't catch because you're not him. Do your own thing. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean by inauthentic. Like, it works for some, it doesn't necessarily work for all.
Right. Right. And I think a lot of Silicon Valley companies did raise a ton of money by copying that, all because the VCs who are giving the money were looking at like, hey, we'll work for the other company. Hey, let's copy that and invest in those type of companies. Right. So it kind of became very circular. And like you said, like, hey, maybe that's the way to do it. I'm not trying to build $1 billion tech company, so I don't need to do this. But I would agree that there's probably an X factor in there, which maybe you and I are not accounting for, but that's what you need to reach $1 billion company, IPO, things like that. You just kind of need that cult following.
So let's go back to, had the idea, figured, let me try to do this MaidThis, kind of a side hustle initially, grew into something more. And was the idea just because I want to leave my job, I want to go travel, this will afford me, or were they kind of in sync, like the two happened at the same time, roughly?
Two things. So my parents had video rental stores. Do you remember those back in the day, like the Blockbusters and stuff? Yeah.
Kids today won't understand.
Dude, that was like the best. Like Friday night, Saturday night, going there, picking out a movie. I guess that was the best time.
It was so much fun.
Yeah. So they had a couple of those. They immigrated here. They opened up their own, and they still had them in the mid 2010s. So clearly not doing that well then. So I wanted to help provide something for them to be able to do from home. So that was one big motivator. And the second is, I wanted to quit my job and have some kind of side income coming in while I was traveling. I thought I'd quit and travel for a year. And then, if things flopped, I would just go back and get some sort of tech job or finance job or something like that. Ended up becoming 7 years, 40 countries later, and kind of still keep going. But yeah, that was the two original motivating factors.
How big is your team right now?
So we have the team's fully remote. So I think across 8 different countries, I think we have about 10 people for my corporate locations. And then the franchisees have their own teams as well.
I understand. And then do you think you're going to expand, or like 10 is a good number and you can run it as is?
Yeah, I think it depends on the level we expand. Typically with home services, depending on the industry, there's kind of plateaus of hiring. So we got just like, I think in 2019, we got to like 2 million in revenue, and that required another layer up of hiring to get over there, right? That was kind of the jump. And that probably would suffice you from like 2 to 3 or something like that.
Okay.
For the level we're at right now, which is now below that, we feel comfortable with the staff we have. So I'm kind of like working the maximization of staff compared to the amount of profit I could get before having to make the next jump and kind of straddle that line. And you kind of just know that through experience of, hey, what's the line where you're kind of capped before the next level of investment? And that's likely where we're going to be holding. So I think 10 right now is kind of where we're going to be staying.
Yeah, 10's a good number. Once you get to 20s, 30s, 40s, it's a big team. You have to start looking
different game.
Different game.
Yeah, got to start changing the world, huh?
revolutionize the cleaning space. Because I love the success stories, but I also love the hardship stories. So I mean, what
That's
were
better.
some like initial hardships or hurdles that you ran into when you were trying to get this business off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a lack of knowledge about how business works, and when you don't know what you don't know, it's really tough. And sometimes it's kind of fun. Like for example, I was working in my corporate job. This was a side hustle. Found a cleaner, sent them to a job, and I didn't know how to pay the cleaner. Like no one taught me, hey, here's how you pay the cleaner. So I was just
Yeah.
like, hey, pull up in from my corporate building. The cleaner would pull up in a car. I'd run out, go to the ATM, get cash, hand it to him in the car. Little did I know, everyone in the building could see me because there's glass windows. So everyone sees me every day handing cash to a guy in a car. So my nickname around the office became drug dealer rather quickly. So everyone just thought I was a drug dealer on the side doing that. And there's
Yeah.
so many of those small hiccups throughout, like just the early learning stage. For example, like being afraid to spend money. So I didn't hire someone to outsource marketing for a long time, prevented our growth. So many mistakes with not letting go of cleaners fast enough or not letting go of operations team members fast enough, things like that. So a lot of small hiccups, I think, with decision making where, I kind of wish I just got the proper coaching earlier on to help prevent that trial and error.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, I think that's why a lot of startups are created by younger folks,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're a little older, a little jaded, you don't have that same energy. You're smarter or wiser in a way, right? Not to say that younger people are stupid, but like it's like you said, you don't know what you don't know. And when you don't know, you're like, I can do anything. I'm invincible. This is no
Yep.
problem. Like all these other people on the internet, they're doing it. Shit, I could do this as well. And when you're older, you have, it's kind of like if you're, I don't know, if you're an athlete for so many years in the beginning, you're like, oh, I'm invincible. I can do anything. And then when you're like, shit, I've broken this. Let me go easy. I'm not trying to hurt myself. I love the invincibility of youth. Like, I think that's like
Right.
it's a superpower. It really is.
It's just the ignorance part, which you break through a bunch of stuff. I was talking to someone I met on Twitter, Chris Munn, and he was telling me how he bought a cleaning company in Florida when he wasn't even there. I was like, wow, that's like kind of a risky move. Why would you do that? And it was like a big company. It was like $1 million company. And he's like, I didn't know better. It was my first deal and I just bought it and it ended up really working out. So now he knows how to do out of state deals. But he said if he knows what he knows now, he never would have taken that chance just because he was dumb enough. It actually worked out. And there's so many of those stories, right? Just kids hustling and doing it because they don't know that like that's not possible. And then it becomes possible. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I mean, have you, so, I mean, I guess I'm interested, like I said, I'm interested in your launch of MaidThis and how you grew it to where it is right now, the whole franchise aspect of it. But I'm interested in the travel aspect, and not only in the travel, because I really want to get into this because you're doing something out of the norm. Majority of the people are not digital nomads. They're not traveling 24/7, staying in all these cool places. But also, like, you've been doing this for over 5 years now, if I'm not mistaken. Like, have you seen a change, like post COVID, like as far as this kind of lifestyle becoming more popular, more tools perhaps accessible to digital nomads, more places, more communities? Just like, is it? Because I feel like it's a growing space, and I'm interested, you being on the front lines, going to all these different countries, meeting people and talking to them. Like, how are you seeing it?
Yeah, definitely a growing space. It's interesting because so I was nomading for let's say 5 years before COVID, paused for a bit, and now I'm kind of back on the road. And I feel like it's almost like an identity shift after COVID, which happened for a lot of different people. Right back
Yeah.
then, you'd say, "Hey, you're digital nomad," and I'd say, "Yeah, that's me. That's my identity." And now it's kind of like I don't like to identify as that because I feel like that's just kind of a part of what I'm just doing now, as opposed to an identity. And I feel like a lot of people who eventually get there will probably fall into the same trap of, if you have your identity based around travel, what happens when you stop traveling? Which is kind of the trap I got into for a while. So even now, like I do travel a lot, but I like to think of myself as just an entrepreneur who happens to travel and I live different places. And I'm wondering if the new wave of nomads, like, I don't know, I'm not on TikTok. Are they posting a bunch of nomad TikTok videos? Because when I was doing it, everyone was on YouTube saying, "Hey, buy my e-course of how you could travel the world, and here's like
Yeah.
a cool video." So with all the tech now, I can imagine the space is blowing up and everyone's just promoting like the travel lifestyle, which I think is incredible, right? And I think the best part about it, in my mind, is just it becomes way more normalized just to have like Zoom calls for everything. Even with cleaners, which we interview, cleaners are the least tech savvy people possible. But now everyone knows how to use Zoom, so we could do Zoom interviews. Now my team members could travel a little bit more because before they couldn't. So I think it just kind of the world opens up a little bit more, which I'm loving, right? And I'm trying to take more advantage of that now as well.
That is the thing, right? Like pre-COVID, Zoom was barely a thing, right? Like a lot of these SaaS tools that are now accessible were barely a thing, or not barely a thing, but maybe not as accessible or prevalent as they are now. So pre-COVID, how are you doing this?
I mean, there was still stuff, right? It's just not everyone was using it. Slack was still around. You still have VoIP systems. There were still all the tools. I'd say like pre-2010, if you tried, it'd probably be a little bit tougher, although people were doing it. So now it's just a lot easier because it's common. Like no one says, "Hey, let's meet in person." You'd be like, "No, like weirdo, I don't want to meet in person. That's weird." Like it's just weird to ask that now.
That's the thing. It's just like COVID forced everyone to go digital. Before you could still like be face to face. Oh, I'm still like going to work in a physical location was standard. Like no one thought of it any different. Like having a meeting, like, I don't know, raising money, whatever it is, you would fly. I remember like a few years back, I flew to Los Angeles. I flew to Vegas from New York. Now we'll just have a Zoom call, get the whole thing over with. It forced everyone to go digital, and in some respects make it a little bit less, obviously less personal, less whatever, but like it's just so much easier and streamlined than it was.
More efficient. Yeah, absolutely. You could be like, I don't know, maybe it's not the people I'm talking to. I haven't met so many new people where I talk to and they happen to be in another country. I thought it would happen more often, truly than I saw. However, I'm sure there's way more freelancers working remotely, way more people working remotely in the corporate setting who now just work from wherever they want, and I don't interact with them. So I think it's blown up and it's going to continue to blow up. So I'm kind of eager to see where it goes. I do think the time zones are a big deal, right? A lot of people who work for US based companies, you have to stay in a relevant time zone. For me right now, I'm 9 hours ahead of Pacific Standard Time. It's okay. It's manageable. I work until midnight if I need to. Yeah. But if I go to Asia, it's not really doable. It's really tough. Hard. So I've seen a lot of people in the nomad space gravitate towards places like Mexico, for example, which is close by. It's cheap, fantastic place, still good time zone. Latin America, South America, you could probably make Europe work as well. That's kind of the stretch of where it goes. But definitely, like Mexico is one of my favorite spots, and tons of people are just migrating over there just because they could work remotely, right? There's like Mexico City and Playa del Carmen are the two hot spots, and just influx of people who work for companies who are there, not just entrepreneurs. So it is pretty interesting to see.
Where would you say are kind of the countries where you were surprised the most, or like you had maybe a preconceived notion like, oh, this country is going to be X, it turned out to be Y, like complete opposite?
Oh man. Let's see. Let me go through the list. So the first place I went was Colombia. Okay. Have you been to Colombia, Roy?
No, I haven't been to Colombia. I've been I did in 2006, I did like a whole trip in South America. I was supposed to get to Colombia. I did like Chile, what was it? Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Bolivia, and then supposed to go to Colombia. Something happened and I had to go back. But Colombia, I was like, I'm going to hit Colombia. That was my goal and never happened.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it. But like when I went in 2015, people were still scared of it. I think that now it's people know like it's an awesome spot. So that'd be one. One more recently. So I was traveling around East Africa, and I did a motorcycle trip across Rwanda. And I think Rwanda might be like one of my favorite countries now. It just like people just think about, hey, the genocide happened. That's what you hear about it. Hotel Rwanda, Don Cheadle was in there saving people, but it's an incredible, like it's an awesome, awesome country. So I loved it. That might be one of my top countries.
What did you love about it?
So the people are actually extremely friendly. So it's kind of surrounded by different countries, which I also went through. But the people in Rwanda, the culture is just very respectful, very, very safe. Like you could leave your bike outside with the keys in it; it'll be there the next day.
Really?
Yeah, it's very safe, very respectful type of people. Extremely clean country. It's one of the top
Okay.
cleanest countries in the world. Infrastructure's there. The roads are great. Incredibly cheap, right? It's East Africa.
Yeah.
And it's,
Dude,
I
you're
think
blowing
part of
my
it,
mind.
man, I'm going to convince everyone to go to Rwanda. Honestly, part of it's just like, it's in East Africa. It feels like
Yeah.
you're in for an adventure, right? Like you
Yeah.
leave the main city, you go outside, there's like kind of rolling hills, there's villagers, everyone's looking at you because it's not that touristy. So it just kind of feels like you're in a foreign place as opposed to like maybe if you just go to Europe or Cape Town where I'm at, it doesn't feel foreign. So that's probably part of the allure as well.
They put you in some sort of a music video, right? Was that in Rwanda?
That was in no, that was in Uganda. That
Oh,
was a
Uganda.
yeah, man. I have so many mixed feelings about that one, but yeah, that was in Uganda.
How did that happen? What was the music video? Just some random.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's a group which I don't want to say the name. It's relatively famous online, and so I was traveling through Uganda, so hit them up and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in the area. Can I help out? It's an orphanage." So just decided to go there, and then they're like, "Hey, can you be in our videos?" So like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." So they just quickly recorded it. So it's one of those random things during travel where you're like, "Okay, this is so funny. I'm doing this right now." But yeah,
Yeah.
that was in the middle of Uganda.
That's awesome, man. And I think that's what I mean. I love about travel. I think that's what people love about travel is just those. There's so much like if I live in Denver. I wake up in the morning. I do work, get on podcasts. I do the things that I need to do. I go to lunch. I have cool weekends, go hiking, etc. Like it's kind of set out. Like I roughly
Mm,
know my day. I roughly know my week when you travel, and I'm not talking about like doing like a weekend at the beach in Mexico. Like when you travel, like what you're doing,
yeah.
like backpacking more, digital no. There's so many variables. There's so much unexpected stuff that happens. There's so much like cool new experiences, meeting awesome people,
Yeah.
trying food you've never thought of. Like even just like I don't know, like expanding your mind, right? Like because as you said, like you don't know what you don't know, and then you go into new places. Like oh, like I had no idea. Like this whole new thing just opened up to me that I never even thought about before. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it truly is like that. And I feel like I don't know, wasting is not the right word, but like early on when I was traveling, I was going to a place to work. You'd go party, you meet other travelers and you're kind of hanging around, but you're kind of like I did expand my mind, but I feel like now what I want to do now more of is dive into the culture, do more unique things, even kind of help out in the countries a little bit more, which is what I was not doing as much before. And that really helps you know like what's actually happening with the culture and expand your mind really, really fast. And then you
Yeah.
find different scenarios. Like I was in Tanzania and I got in to go stay with the last hunter-gatherer tribe in Africa.
Oh wow.
So stayed with them for 24 hours and we went on a hunt in the morning. Like we just ran at the campfire. Like it was just wild, right? They go bow and arrows and everything like that. But things like that where, I remember sitting there, there's the campfire, they're singing, I was looking at the stars. I'm like, this is wild. Like this, I can't believe I'm doing this. I was so, so happy. But that's only possible if you're there, right? If you have a remote job, a remote company and actually expose yourself to that kind of thing. And that's why like it's fine if you have a business which is just made to print money for you, right? If it supports what you actually want to do and what you're passionate about, that's totally cool.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's just like not every business has to be sexy, like air quotes, right? Like it doesn't have to
Hmm.
be like there's so many blue collar businesses that are, again, quote unquote, non sexy businesses. And I like, especially on Twitter, I've been seeing this more and more in the past year or so. Like, because also my mind was always just like, got to go big, big
Mm.
businesses, raise a lot of money, try to like just the regular narrative. And then I started listening to a lot of these people on Twitter. It's like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Like, there's a guy I had on the podcast, Daniel Vasello, and he's got what he calls a portfolio of small bets, which
Mm.
is he creates a lot of small type businesses and puts it online. And this guy makes probably 700,000 a year, works for
What are
himself.
these? What are these kind of businesses he does?
Mostly like he does like courses on Gumroad, right? That's one.
Yeah.
And I think he's probably top 0.1% of sellers on Gumroad. He's really good. He used to work in Amazon before. So I think he sells like something along those lines. And then he like creates a couple of different things where he sells, and he's got like, so yeah, mostly core. I probably, off the top of my head, I don't remember. This was almost a year ago that we talked, but I think 70 to 80% of his income is probably through Gumroad, through these courses.
Gotcha. Man, that's incredible.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, he doesn't have to go to put on a suit and tie. He doesn't have Zoom calls with the corporate. He doesn't have to do any of that. And he makes probably double what he was making in Amazon, and can, I don't know, make his own time, make his own schedule, have that freedom to do what he wants. And I think he's building a cabin like now in like Pacific Northwest somewhere. So
because why not?
Because why not?
Roy, Yeah. Roy, you said you went through the ringer of raising capital for a startup and everything. Is that right?
I did. Yeah. Like 7 years ago.
Okay. We're talking about this right now, and it sounds like you're on the side of, oh, don't do that. But I'm curious on your experience of that. Was it positive? Was it negative? What are your thoughts?
It sucked ass, but but I mean, look, I don't think there's a negative or a positive in either. I think they're both fine, and you can do whatever you want. Like, I think I'm actually, I don't know if I should talk about this, but I'm actually doing something similar right now. I don't want to get into too much detail, but
yeah,
I think they're both fine. I think if you can bootstrap a business, that's fine. I think if you want to raise capital because you have some big idea of what you want to do, I think that's fine. I think if you want to do like a air quote, non-sexy, traditional blue collar type business and digitize it to be applicable to the modern era, that's like whatever it is that you want to do, it's all fine. They're all varying degrees of difficulty that you're going to be put through the ringer. Nothing is easy. If you think making money is easy, it's not even easy if you do a 9 to 5. Like, just there's no easy. I think that's sometimes a lot of people sell you. These people drive me crazy. All these YouTube gurus and Instagram gurus, and they're out there trying to sell courses like, you can be a chipmunk and like make 6 figures from home doing nothing. I'm like, no, but you can't, because otherwise everyone would be doing this. Like, no, it's hard. Like, don't buy into like what some of these people are trying to sell you, like making money, raising money. None of that shit's easy, right? Like, it takes hard work, it takes effort, and then you can get there. It's just not like, oh, you can sit on your couch, have no idea how to read and write, and make 6 figures a year easily. That's not reality.
Yeah. But people want a quick buck, right? So that's what sells.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And I see that with, I don't know. And actually, this is completely unrelated, but I'm interested because you have a little bit of you're, I think, more objective since you're kind of removed from the US for a while. It seems like in the US recently, there's been like such a degradation of like mental health. And I wonder if that's true worldwide, because I don't believe it is. Like, I've traveled. I'm originally from Israel. Like, I talk to people from everywhere, and it seems like, I don't know, it's specific to the US. And it's also, the other problem in the US is just like the amount of drugs that you can get, like pharmaceutical drugs, right? Like, I have depression, here's a drug. I have this, here's a drug. Instead of like community, right? Like, I feel like there's a lot of there's a lot of solitude in the US, maybe because how big it is or whatever the reason. But like, if you go to Mediterranean countries, like family is a massive thing. Like, always with family, always with community. And that's just one aspect of it. It could be, I don't know, but like, instead of taking drugs, like, go work out, go to nature, find a community of people, like do things that are actually harder to do. But like, I think a lot of people maybe just don't want that. They just want like maybe a pill. And I'm not saying some people definitely should take those pills, like for sure. But I think sometimes it's just the easier route. And I'm wondering, like, if, I don't know, like how do you see it like in the rest of the world? Is that something that like everyone in the world is currently experiencing, maybe because of COVID, or is it a little bit more of a US thing?
Man, I love the question. Like, there's so much there. So part of me wonders too, with the degradation in the US, I feel like we're seeing it more, but I wonder if it's just talked about more now. Both from just like, hey, it's okay to talk about, but also part of it is like a Gen Z thing of saying, hey, I'm depressed and let me joke about this, right? I think it's a dual thing, which is making it a little bit more apparent. So I wonder if this has always been there and now it's just come to light, or there's something actually happening now. Yeah. I agree with you. I wonder if it's just part of the US, which is more of a pill popping, quick fix culture, which then will, like, it bleeds itself into buying an online course, which is promising a quick fix, right?
Yeah.
But that could also just be like human nature. I don't really know. I do agree with other countries though, where that culture is not there. Like even in Europe, which is very Western, that culture is not there. They typically, even in the medical field, they treat symptoms more than they would, so they'll treat the root cause with lifestyle changes as opposed to actually pill popping. But yeah, to your question about other countries and mental health, it's kind of tough to tell, honestly. Like I wish I could say, hey, everyone seems happier. But I would assume if someone goes to the US and everyone's saying, hi, how are you all the time, everyone's going to be like, oh, this country's so happy. Like, this
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
Like, right. So like, I don't really know what's going on. I would agree with you though, that the happiest people I've ever seen in the world are typically in places where community is strong. That one I know for a fact, right? Like that's the commonality with all the happiest people I've seen in the world is community is a big part of it. And I do agree with maybe not just the U.S. but even like Western society overall. There's less of an emphasis on community and more of an emphasis on the individual. It's just part of the culture. It is what it is, and that could probably allow people to fall into mental health issues faster than other countries. So I guess from like just you and I theorizing this, I'd probably say, yeah, there's probably a reason why the US is falling into that a little bit more than other countries. And I think that'd be a community-based approach, plus the kind of quick fix culture that we have in the US as well.
And I had Dr. David Rabin on the podcast 2 weeks ago, I think, something like that. And he's a big proponent of psychedelic treatment for PTSD, trauma, that kind of stuff. But he's got this thing, polyneuro. But essentially what he was talking about was touch, like how much touch can alleviate stress and anxiety and depression, like just human touch, just contact. And we were talking about how, like in India or in some parts in South America, the Middle East, Mediterranean countries, like touching, like in India, or like if you go to the Middle East, you'll see like guys holding hands. It's a thing, right? No, you're not going to see that in the US. It's not a thing. And I'm not saying one is wrong, one is right. It is what it is. But then like also Mediterranean countries, like they're so warm, it's a lot of hugging and touching, and it doesn't really exist in the US. Like this is my personal space. Do not enter my personal space. And I think that lack of touch is also something that could, have some responsibility there, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I almost wonder like, there's the pros and cons of the individual culture. I think there's something in the US culture which really leads itself to being entrepreneurial in a way which
100%.
even other Western societies aren't. Right. And there's things like, for example, let's say Germany, it's almost frowned upon to be an entrepreneur, right? Because they're very much about like, it's frowned upon, and the government makes it very difficult for you to be an entrepreneur as well. You pay crazy amount of taxes, like it's kind of ridiculous. But the reason is because strategically, they want people in the system. If they have people in the system, the healthcare system works, everything works, people pay taxes, like everyone's taken care of. So the culture there is more about, hey, we want everyone to be taken care of through our group collective government system. We therefore collectively frown upon entrepreneurship. The US, all the success stories and everything you hear, like everything promotes individual accolades, someone rising from the bottom all the way to the top. It's very much of an individual focused society, which I think drives people to probably want to do more, whether it's for ego or whatever, it doesn't really matter, but it's just, that's what people are driven to do. Like entrepreneurship is very much valued. Risk taking is valued. A lot of that has to do with the individual as opposed to the benefit of the community, which probably allows the US citizens to kind of advance more business wise and money wise.
Yeah.
How that relates to mental health and stuff, I don't really know, right? Yeah. It's almost like two sides of the weight, like which one do you prefer? But there is, I guess, some benefit of the individual part, but I 100% agree with the warmth of other countries. There's benefits of that, right? There's things that I notice while traveling where it's just not really existing in the US, except in an immigrant family, maybe.
Yeah. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. The US is great, and there's a lot of positive things. And I think when you travel, you get to see those. Sometimes I'll hear things here that people, especially maybe younger people that have never really left the US, and they'll say certain things about the US. I'm like, dude, you're delusional. Like, go travel. Like, I think what you're saying has no real foundation in reality. And then I think when you travel, and for good or bad, like you said, like people here are so friendly, right? Like I live in Colorado, people say hi. Like I'm on hiking trails. Hey, good morning. How you doing? Have a great day. Like that doesn't really happen in any country that I've been to, at least. Like no
Yep.
other people don't say hi on the street. You know, especially if you go to small towns here in the US, people are extremely friendly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Like that's a plus. That's I think probably one of the friendliest people. Maybe Canadians can beat the US, but other than that, that's pretty much it. So it's not net negative or net positive. It's just I think there's certain things that are amazing, and then some of those things perhaps have some drawbacks, which is what we touched on.
And I think with traveling, you do understand from a distance, like, for example, a lot of the propaganda we're fed, where like now I'm like, oh, it's kind of weird. We pledge allegiance to a flag every single day. I never really thought about that. Or wow, we actually stand up and salute the military. No other country does that. That's a little bit weird. Why is there flags everywhere? Like you don't think these things because you grow up around it. It's normal. Then you realize like, oh wow, a lot of these things are not normal, but it's in the U.S. Like a lot of people who are foreigners will come to the U.S. and say, why is there drug commercials everywhere?
Yeah.
That's weird. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, that actually is weird. I never really thought about that, but big pharma controls everything in the US, so that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it's funny how much like you just notice when you're out of it and you realize like, oh, this is not very normal.
No.
But you don't notice that until you start getting out and traveling.
Yeah. And again, that's the beauty of travel. Doesn't matter if you're US born, Germany born, wherever it is, you're born in a capsule of ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those ideas identify you as a person because it's the food you grew up on, right? It's the ideas you grew up on, it's the community you grew up on, it's the clothes you wear, it's the sports teams you follow. And then you travel and you're like, oh shit, like they have a completely different way of thinking about these things. Like it's not the way we think about it back home. And like, oh, this is interesting. Maybe I should apply. And then, the more places you go, the more ideas you blend into, the more it's just, like, there's no way to stay indifferent to it. Like it
Right.
creates something within you that makes you start to think about things a little differently.
100%. I think you said it so well. And I'm very optimistic with the way things are headed with remote work, with kind of everything we've had in the post-COVID world of people traveling more. What is that going to mean? Ideas are going to change. People are going to change more rapidly than they did before. I think it's all net positive. I think it's going to be awesome. So I'm very bullish on what's going to happen with kind of the change in mentality.
Are there countries that you're seeing that are like ahead of the curve on this? That they're like, hey, remote workers, come work. We're gonna, you're not gonna pay tax. We're gonna give you this and this. We're gonna, incentivize you to come work for in our country for 6 months, a year, or whatever.
Oh, for sure. There's countries which have they call it a nomad visa colloquially.
Okay.
Bahamas does that. Barbados did that. Lithuania did that. And I'm sure there's quite a few other countries which are doing it. A lot of them are just dropping visa requirements. What's kind of ridiculous is like a lot of African countries still have visa requirements. And in my mind, I thought, hey, you guys are the ones who probably need people to come in. Like maybe you should drop the visa requirements.
Yeah.
I like, for example, Portugal is blown up. Like everyone is going to Portugal, right? So I don't know what they did to attract people, but it's working well for the economy there. A lot of people are bringing US dollars there. It's very easy to move over there as well. A lot of places have golden visas. Thailand, for example, you could buy a 10-year visa there. So you just have to have X amount of cash and X amount of, yeah, you could buy a golden visa there. Spain, you could do it well. You have to buy property over there. So,
That's a bit harder.
Yeah, a little bit harder, But Thailand, you could, I think it's not cheap. I think it's like 10, 15 grand. But if you want a 10-year visa, not bad.
Because Thailand, I've been to Thailand twice, and I had to work hard just to get a 2 months visa.
Right.
I was there in training camp. I went to train, and it was hard. So like a 10-year visa, that'll be worth it. Like, I don't know, 10 grand, I think it would be worth it.
Yeah, especially if you're planning to stay there, you don't have to do border runs.
Yeah.
Easy.
Because every time you have to leave the country, come back, it's a headache.
It is a headache. Absolutely. So I'm happy not to have to do that anymore, at least.
You got the golden?
No, not for Thailand. I think in general, I'm not I'm not traveling as, or a lot of places I'm going, I probably won't be there for more than 3 months. So it like not as much, I don't need as many border runs now in my life as I did back in the day. So it's been kind of nice.
What are some countries that you have for the foreseeable future?
So after I leave Africa, heading up to Norway, which talked about, I'm going to Israel, and so definitely going to get some tips from you on what to do over there.
Yeah. How long are you going to be there?
Israel, I think it'll be 2.5 weeks.
Soon. Okay. Yeah, you can do a good amount in 2.5 weeks. It's a small country.
Yeah, like Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, maybe hit up Jordan
Nice.
is kind of the plan. Yeah, yeah.
It's,
So we'll definitely talk afterwards on some tips for that. I'm pretty stoked for that one.
yeah.
That's pretty much it, man. But top of my list is Japan whenever I could get there. Just chow down on food, have an awesome time there. So hopefully I can plan that pretty soon.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
I mean, I guess before we kind of wrap it up, I guess for young people, because we do have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast, like, there's a lot of young people there that maybe are thinking of doing something similar, or they're not sure what type of business, like they want to start their own thing, but they're just not kind of sure about how to go about it. Like, what would you tell them? Like, what should be their first step or goal, or how do you see it starting out for them?
Yeah, I remember when I was starting out, I was trying to do something new, like, oh, I should create an app for this, or hey, this doesn't exist yet, let me do this. Then I realized the easiest way to make money is by looking at what's already making money and doing that as well. Like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to start something brand new. You don't need to change the world with a tech idea unless you really want to.
Yeah.
So if you look at the businesses which are already making money, just see how you can do it slightly better. And for me, I found local businesses are a fantastic way to do that. Because you're only competing against your local market. You can look at what your competitors doing just in your local market and try to figure out ways to beat them. So my advice would be just don't reinvent the wheel if your goal is to make cash, right? There's already ways to make cash. There's unlimited ways to make money. Just use one of them. That'd be what I'd say.
I love that. That's awesome, dude. Neel, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, man.
That was fun, Roy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Do your plug. Where are the best places for people to find you on online?
Yeah, Twitter is the place I'm probably most active. That's where you and I met. So
Sure.
Twitter would be a great place. You can follow me at Neel B. Parekh. Also, if anyone is interested or know anyone who's interested in a MaidThis franchise where you can pretty much copy what I did to be completely remote and have a local business, check out MaidThisFranchise.com. That's MaidThis franchise.com.
Cool. Yeah, guys, go check it out. And as always, I'll be sure to put everything in the show notes, make it easy for you to find. And Neel, this was awesome. Thanks again, bud.
Thanks so much.